every once in a while in aviation, as in business, you find yourself suddenly in a position you didn't expect to be in, and you have to take some kind of dramatic action to correct it. Most of the time, we don't have to take what I call the nuclear option, but sometimes in both aviation and business, we have to do that. So I want to talk about the nuclear option today. Let me give you an example. Back in the late 50s, early 60s, the Air Force had a problem when they first set up ejection seats in their fighter jets. And the problem was the pilots weren't using them. They didn't want to take the nuclear option, which was to wreck a multi-million-dollar jet to save their own lives, and so they were dying with the airplane when the airplane was crippled. And we make the same mistakes in our businesses. I've made the same mistake a bunch of times in business, and it's very tempting to do it in aviation, except in aviation it can kill you. In the business, it can kill your business. Let me give you an example. So I've seen many situations with startups I've worked with where they really needed more capital, or they needed different team members or a different technical platform, and they simply were unwilling to admit it because the course they were on looked like it might possibly survive and work, but the odds were against them. But they kept going because they didn't want to take the nuclear option, change up the team, stop the project, go back to the investors, etc. The problem with that is there's a psychological thing to overcome, which is we don't really believe the statistics. We think we're the exception to the rule rather than the norm. So both in aviation and in business, there's two ways I see to overcome this fallacy of not taking the nuclear option, which, by the way, turns out to be the conservative route, right, in these cases I'm talking about. The first is you've got to envision the scenarios ahead of time. So in aviation, as an example, you have to understand when and where. You have to read the statistics and understand when and where it's better to crash the airplane under control than to try and keep flying. An example is flying into bad weather. Turns out statistically in a small airplane, you're oftentimes better landing in a field or on a road and getting out of the weather entirely than you are continuing on into bad weather where it's very statistically likely to kill you. In business, same thing when we see the financial issues that we've seen, or technical debt or technical platform problems or whatnot. Oftentimes people will go to the hairy edge, and they end up, even if they end up surviving in the long run, they make investors angry, they hurt their customers, their team, etc. And those are very hard things to recover from. It's hard to regain that trust. And so while it may not necessarily be a total death knell for the business, it would have been a lot smarter to take the nuclear option, stop the project, change the team before you run into a brick wall. So envisioning those scenarios and knowing where your break points are is the first thing. The second piece is getting outside help. And sometimes in aviation, when things happen quick, you may not have that option. But if you do, and certainly in business you do, every year that goes by that I get more help and I request more, or I seek advice from other CEOs, other founders, whoever it might be, people that have more experience than I do, I make those decisions faster, smoother, and better than I did before. I'd love to hear your stories about the nuclear option, when it's worked, when it hasn't, and of course, as always, I'll get back to you as quick as I can. Thanks.